all of us creators, entrepreneurs are just selling sunshine. Everyone else has the same access. It's not like we have something special as far as content goes. We're not sharing something new. The sunshine isn't new. What's new about it is when you look at your own life, your lifeline, your story, your truth, your way you see the world, you are the magnifying glass that transforms that ordinary sunshine into something beautiful that ignites. And that's what authorship really is.
What would the world look like if people felt like they mattered? Welcome to the Lead with Love podcast, exploring what it means to lead with love in business and life. I'm your host, Jadah Sellner, and in this show, I'll share meaningful conversations to help you, the creative, the entrepreneur, the world changer, reach more people, go after your dreams, and serve your community with love. I appreciate you joining me. Now, let's get cozy and start today's episode. If you've wanted to take a peek behind the curtain of writing and publishing a book, then this episode is for you, because in today's conversation, I get cozy with my friend and personal book coach, Azul Terronez. And Azul is the host of the Top Writing Podcast, Authors Who Lead. Definitely go check that out. And what we're doing today is actually having another behind the scenes conversation of my book writing process. There is a part 1 version, so today's conversation is part 2. So if you'd like to listen to part 1 of this conversation that happened over a year ago, yes, this is how long it takes to write a book, especially when life happens and the unexpected. Head over to jadahtsellner.com/156 to get all caught up. And just a little bit of background about Azul, because I highly recommend him. Like, I learned so much from him just being in conversation. He's also a really, really good friend, but I pay him to be my book coach because he's that good. He helps authors and entrepreneurs and leaders write and publish books that people love so that they can reach more people, grow their brand, and share their message in an authentic way. And he's been called a book whisperer. He's my personal book whisperer, and I talk more about it in our conversation today. He's built a whole signature coaching program just around the idea that creating books is about building the conversation that you want to own. And that's what I think is just the power of books, right? So often my friends and I behind the scene are like, what do I want to be known for? What's the one thing? And what I learn, I'm multifaceted. We're whole human beings that have a lot of ways that we want to show up. And I'm not willing to put myself in one tiny little box. So I hold a multitude of boxes, and, from conversations about leading with love and building community and being able to, build our businesses without sacrificing what matters most. Like, there's so many conversations that I want to have. And so I'm just a rebel. And I think the best way for me to really build a conversation about, the conversation that I want to own is actually writing books. And so I've made a commitment to actually write books for a very long time. So, I have Simple Green Smoothies. I'm working on my next book. I actually literally today just sent my final book proposal, beautifully designed in collaboration with my website designer, Rachel Pesso, who kind of built the visual identity, and then designer Chris Beltran, where he has kind of put it into a PDF form that basically publishers and editors can review. So I'll definitely do a part 3 of behind the scenes of the book process. And if you're curious and have more questions about what it takes to not only write, but traditionally publish or even self-publish books, then definitely reach out to me and my team at jadahtsellner.com/contact, or just send me a message on Instagram or Facebook at Jadah Sellner and just ask me any questions that you have. And I'd love to bring those conversations. I feel like I'll bring my literary agent on for a conversation too, to just talk about the process of publishing and getting our ideas out there in the world. So I know that was a lot, it was a mouthful, but I think now would be a really, really good time for us to get connected connected with Azul, and he's just a super smart, amazing human being. Please, please go check him out at authorswholead.com. He has over 2 million views on his TEDx talk, What Makes a Good Teacher Great. So he's not only an amazing coach, but he's also just an amazing teacher and a person who can really dig into the essence. So I'm really, really excited for us to get cozy with Azul and go behind the scenes of my book writing process, part 2. Let's dive in. Hi, Azul.
Hi, Jadah.
I'm excited because we are going to have a conversation about behind the scenes of the next book that I'm writing. And this is part 2.
Right. And it was interesting as we were checking in with each other, trying to remind ourselves where we were in this process and how long ago it was.
I think would we say it's close to like a year and a half ago now?
Yeah, it was somewhere in March or April that we were having that initial conversation of 2019.
Right. So it's exciting, one, to really unpack the timeline of how long it takes to write a book, especially when you're writing a book, as you say, to transform yourself first. And then when you transform, the reader will transform as well.
Right. And I think that's the surprised result of a book, that you allow it to be a creative process and not a task that you achieve, because then you start to experience the things you're telling other people they should be doing, right? I think that's the thing is like, dang, it's for other people. It's not supposed to be happening to me. I'm like, yes, it is.
Yeah. And there's so much resistance and so much fear and just like agony in the book writing process. And this is not my first time writing a book, but my first book, that I wrote was Simple Green Smoothies. It was a recipe book. It was just a different modality of expression, which is actually one of the reasons why I exited my company in 2016, because it wasn't a full expression of who I am and how I want to share and serve in the world. And I knew that this next book that I write is an embodiment, an expression of who I am, what I believe, what I stand for. And because I hired you as my book coach, I had to do the inner work to get to where we are today.
Right. I think that's the surprising thing. Even though I tell people this is going to happen, when they're faced with the thing that they're talking about in a deep way, it's really sort of shocking still, no matter how many times I've done it and helped people say any book that's worthy of a transformation on the part of the reader has to occur at some point with the author. And it's easy to get lost in that the idea of the content is the book. And I often say, really good books get lost in the words, meaning words can sometimes cloud our vision for what a book is. And really, it's that subtle transformation you make when you're pointing in the direction of this thing that you're trying to say, this is what I want for you. And then what you're struggling with shows up. You're like, wait a second, this is too close to home.
Yeah.
How is this happening?
Yeah, there were many tears processing stuff. And I ended up hiring a therapist because of our work that we did together.
Wait,
and
I caused you to have a therapist?
Yes, you did.
I hope that's a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's such a good thing because, before we started recording, I just said, I feel like I'm just a more grown-up version of myself right now, that I'm more in my body than I ever have been. I feel this sense of wisdom that is integrating on a cellular level that didn't exist when I was writing the book. I'm like, what is this book? I don't know what it is. And that's what creativity looks like, right? To be in relationship with ambiguity. Am I saying it right? I'm so bad with big words.
Ambiguity?
Yep,
Yeah,
that word. There's too many syllables. Right? Of like really sitting in the unknown and just trusting the process. So yes, I hired a therapist, and I'm so thankful because what we unpacked in that process was how much healing work that I had to do with just my own family origin story, right? Like not all of those pieces will show up in this book. But trust me, this is not the last book that I'm writing. Like, Azul, you know that I'm on a decade path of learning the craft of writing, of being an author. And even with having a traditionally published book, I'm like, am I an author? I don't feel like one, and I don't want to write. But now I want to write books. So that's the gift that you gave me in our work together, because I was resisting it. I was like, I want a ghostwriter. I want someone else to do this. Like, we want to outsource our transformation, our healing, and we just can't.
Right. Right. Doesn't that sound so wonderful? Let's just outsource it. I have people clean my house. I've had people run my podcast. Why don't I just outsource this? And that conversation that you just had is the truth. I've worked with many people and they've been sent my way and they said, Azul, they're looking for a ghostwriter. I'm like, just send them to me. I would love to talk to them about this. And it's not that the majority of books that are written actually are written by ghostwriters. And so even some of your favorite authors didn't write those books. And that's not a bad thing. That's just a different style. But the reason I show up in the world is to help people experience the creative process a books can bring to the author. And when you have that, you own this feeling of I'm an author. It's not just, oh, I wrote a book. No, I understand the expression of becoming an author and showing up the days when there's resistance, showing up when I think I don't have anything to say or doubt that I'll even make a difference, or what the heck was I thinking starting this project altogether. That's the work of an author. And some people run from it because it's unfamiliar. And I remind them, no, you're just experiencing what it feels like to be an author. You just haven't felt it before. So don't think it's strange. It's exactly what's supposed to be happening in this moment. And I think when you have that gift, you have epiphanies like yourself, like, oh my gosh, I am an author. This is the work of an author. This is a transformation that writing books brings. And it's a blessing, but you just don't know it if you don't live it yourself.
Yeah. And so I've definitely been living it. Thank you. And so, like, I want to catch people up that, in our work together, you're coaching me on a weekly basis, unpacking the stories and the pebbles, as you talk about. And I want to say I wrote over 13,000 words in our work together. And we, our conversation came out in May. And then in June, my father passed away. And it was interesting because the story that we were unpacking when we kind of started unpacking my story in November of 2018, that was when we started to play with the book. And I was healing my relationship with my father and unpacking those stories in the process, and then having the therapist to kind of hold me into that next process. And so when I found out that my father passed away, I actually found out that he had passed away in November when we were doing the work of unpacking my origin story. And I was like, Azul, I don't even know why this isn't part of the book. This isn't what I'm writing a business book. And I really feel that there's outside sources, energy guides that guided me through that work with you. We were doing really deep work that I could start to heal that and really be prepared for the loss of my father. And I didn't have a relationship with him for 20 years. And so there was such deep transformation and healing. And it also was an invitation for me to put the book, the physical act of writing the book, down so that I could grieve and show up for all the things that you have to do when you lose a parent, the logistics of grief and death. Right. And that was actually really hard for me. That was to I felt like I was 13,000 words in and making progress. And then the unexpected happens, life happens, and we have to put the creative work down. What I kept telling myself during that summer last year was, I'm living the book. Whatever's happening right now in this season of loss and grief, this is the stuff that I wasn't willing to put in the book before. And I just had to know that I was living whatever needed to be in this book or the next book. And I don't know, I would love for you to kind of speak to when authors have to lay down a book for a certain season and amount of time. Do you have any just thoughts and perspective around that?
Right. Well, as we discussed, if the book isn't transformative for you, how do you expect it to be transformative for the reader? We're talking about the conscious things in our books when we only use what we know instead of writing a book from who we are. And that's why we were doing that exercise of visiting the lifeline of the journey of Jadah, was to see, well, what made you who you are? Not your thinking, but who are you in between those highs and lows? And we were talking about those highs and lows in life. And that's when we noticed some patterns. And in the last episode, we talked about the difference between movement and momentum. And really the shift was occurring right in front of us as we were talking about it. And then it was sort of all of a sudden. When you have to lay a book down, that's when it's serving you. You're like, oh, this really is for me. This is for me to look at what I'm trying to tell people about making space for themselves and trusting their own intuition and finding their own path. It became real. Because the intention was, we're writing a book at this amount of time. This is what we're doing. And then life happened. And so when that occurs, I just remind people how the blessing it is. Like, oh, it's here. It's here for you. Here it is. It's exactly what you needed. And you're your own best teacher in this work. So I always honor that process. And I'm always looking for it. Sometimes it happens in different ways. But people, if they take it as a judgment, like it's a goal. My goal was to be done on this date. I said, well, if you don't think of a book process as a goal, think of it as a commitment. I'm committing to getting this out of me into the world. And as Maya Angelou says, there's no greater agony than an untold story inside of you. So I observe that happening with authors. And when it feels stunted because life happens, I just remind them that the book already is. The fact that we're attaching words to it so other people could know it is just a part of the process. So don't think the book is somehow disappearing from you. It is becoming, it's manifesting in real time, the book that you're writing. So that's important. And some of the best work that I've been a part of has allowed this to happen. And when it happens to this depth, the book in itself is the reward. And it's sort of a celebration of that moment for you. And that people learn from it is a blessing, an additional gift. That way people aren't waiting for when the book gets out, then I get this wonderful thing, this praise, this worthiness. When the book serves you in the real time, then it's delivered already, its value, before it's even finished.
Ooh, I love that. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, so good. A soul, just like chicken soup for the soul. And so I let the book rest. And I ended up letting it rest for almost close to a year. And that was really hard. And this series of conversations that I've been having recently as I'm making my comeback to the world and sharing my voice and my experience, is I'm not hiding, I'm healing. And so I really resonate with removing things to be a goal and more of a commitment or even a devotion, right? Of being able to share that untold story. And as you know, being my coach and also being a dear, dear friend, more grief would happen along the way where we had to put our fur baby Clementine down. And then, my 16-year-old brother passed away unexpectedly in November of that same year, right? So like life really called me to slow down and to be present with what really matters the most. And I really had to lay down not just the book, but even my business. Like I was like, no more podcast episodes right now. Like I don't have the capacity. And I always talk about serving from the overflow. And if I'm empty because of life's unexpected things that show up that we have to show up for, then I can't serve from that place. And I'm serving from depletion. And so I'm celebrating myself that I gave myself the permission to pause. The same thing that I tell my clients, like I was really in integrity with who I am and what I'm about in the world, and just allowed myself to be with my family, to receive support. I feel like that was a huge gift for me, is learning how to receive love. Like I give love. And that was something that we unpacked in our work together around the book. It's like, this is why leading with love matters to you so much, Jadah. This is why community matters so much to you, because like you're giving what you actually want. You want community and connection and belonging. You want love. And so I had to learn the thing that I'm telling all my clients to do, to like receive support, be held, like all of the things where I'm always showing up for everyone else. And I really allowed myself to just unravel, to be in the full breadth of grief and uncertainty and loss and heartbreak and all of those pieces. And at the same time, I was still balancing with my ambition, almost like at odds with my ambition and my vision. And also like, this is what life is presenting to you, because I had so much compare and despair when I would see other people who are like, wait, they're writing a book like the book that I want to write, which I'm sure you have some thoughts about that.
I do.
But of like, just like people getting book deals, people getting their published book, like that is so hard when you are surrendering to life. And like, I do have to pause. I do have to lay it down. I do have to show up for myself first before I give to others. I really have to nourish and replenish myself. So I just wanted to share that, because even though I have some experience and knowledge that we should pause and take a step back and honor our capacity and our energy and not burn out, I was still like at odds with my ambition and the goal to write a book. Like I'm like I felt this letdown and disappointment that I was telling my literary agent. I'm like, I'll have it to you by this month, and then I'm like, psych, just kidding. Like maybe 2 years later, I'll have this book proposal for you, or, like, so those pieces. I'm curious what you have to say. And then we can kind of fast forward of when I actually got to pick the book back up.
Yeah, the comparisonitis is really difficult. And that's a challenge. And that really resonated with me when I think about it, because we should ourselves, we should our pants, right? So we think we should have done it already, finished already. I said I would do this. But that's why this idea of it being a commitment as opposed to a goal, then, I commit to yoga. I hear people say things like, I commit to meditation. I'm meditating every day. They're counting days. I'm like, that's a dangerous thing, because the moment you miss, then you somehow aren't worthy, or it's not right. And a commitment to it is just returning to it every day, when you can. And you can't be wrong when you have that sort of level of commitment. And the thing we noticed, as you brought up, was that the thing you were writing about is what you were longing for. The thing that you were teaching others is what you really needed: nourishment and soulfulness in your business, and leading with love, and feeling like the way you do it is okay, not the way other people do. And that is exactly what you needed. But you were writing about it, and it doesn't surprise me that you experienced it in real time, because if you didn't write it about it from that place, it would just be words. But it's a truth. It's not just a truth for other people. It was true for you. So I find that that's what's fascinating about this book process, is that we were trained in the school to be editors. So our brain goes really quickly to the end goal, which is a done book, well-written book. Just like it was in school. I got an A, I got a B, I got good marks, because we're trained to edit something to get a prize, as opposed to what I think writing really should be, is writing is a creative process that can transform you and show you who you are to yourself. And if we did that with school, with kids, and showed them the purpose and point of writing, more people would be writers. Instead, we're terrified of the end, the means, the rejection. And that's all we think about in the midst of writing. But if we could let that attachment to the process of being an editor and then be a creator, creators are beautiful because there's no time bound. Creativity has no time associated with it. Time is the construct we create. Creativity can't be wrong. Creativity is perfect as it comes out. So with that shift, you start to accept the fact that, oh, this is what it is to be an author, being in this messy place until it's not. So I just want to honor you for doing that, because it's what making the manuscript so worthy and rich and true and meaningful for you as you're sharing it into the future with the world.
Yeah. And I always say, don't put a timeline on your dreams. So I have to live that truth of like, oh, something happened, extend the timeline, the end.
Yeah. Period.
we period with a T. Like we have to extend that grace to ourselves. And, what I'm writing about and what I'm taking a stand for, my truth is like, when we're building something, we have to extend that grace to ourselves of what we're teaching. We have to live it ourselves. And so I really had to be called to live what I preach in a much deeper way, because I do live it on the surface. But on a soul level, like where like my whole system, my nervous system, my heart, my intellect, my body, my spirit, like that they're all on board and pointing in the right direction. That's what I got to integrate in the season of pausing and giving myself space to heal. And like, I'm so thankful for past Jadah for like trusting current Jadah to make that executive decision, because it was like slowing down in business, slowing down in revenue. But it was like, I'm a serial builder, right? Like I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years. Like I can create and recreate and build and rebuild over and over again. Like I've built that confidence in myself to know that that is possible. But I don't think I knew that before. Do you know what I mean? Like I knew that, but like I didn't feel it. And now like I know that's true. And that's the trust that I had with myself to really lay the book down, lay my business down, like do simple enough to show up enough to like make sure my family is okay and we're fed and we're taken care of. And then do the deep healing work and allow myself to really, really come out on the other side like whole and complete. And so I did that. And so let's fast forward, right? We went from 2018 when you and I started doing the work of the book, and then 2019 where we wrote some words and, connected to what I wanted to write. And then we put it down to rest, to grieve. And then 2020 came.
Right.
And then a whole new wave of grief entered the building. So of like collective grief with the world. But because I gave myself the space to heal, that I actually had the capacity to create in 2020. And I've been calling it, and I'm going to talk about this in the book, but I've been in my creative cocoon in 2020. And so I want to share the update of behind the scenes of the book of where we are now. I actually picked the book back up earlier this year, and I ended up writing 30,333 words in 3 days for this book.
Amazing.
And because I let it rest, right? It's like I always say that I am a slow cooker, not an instant pot. And like, even if like work doesn't look like it's happening on the outside, like things are simmering very slowly, being very patient. And then when it's time to like get my butt back in the seat, then everything is there. And it's like, well cooked, well seasoned. And I think that's what happened for me is I really allowed myself to heal, and I had the capacity and the energy. And also, a question that I asked myself, kind of like this 2020 vision, right? Like 2020 is going to be my year. Like we all had that, like of that to point towards. But I said to myself, like, I want to write this book. And I didn't have to put a timeline on when it needed to be done, but I knew that that was the most important thing for me to do. I had a shared conversation with my friend, Nikki Elledge Brown, of like, that is the highest like expression of who we are, is to be authors. And I couldn't let this heart project stay on the back burner any longer. And so this was me acting in love over metrics, was like, I know the book is not going to make me money, but I'm putting this first. And then I'm allowing anything that does make me money to fund the heart project, right? Like allow my cash projects to fund the heart project. And so I had to make that decision because I kept making decisions to make more money. And then I had no space for my creativity, my book. And so that's something that I switched this year, was like, I know what I want. I want books. I want retreats. I want my podcast. I want a planner. And I would say that for like over, I don't know, 3 years, but I was never, working on them. And so that shift, I think that's what 2020 has been calling of us, is like, what really matters? Like, what is like your truest, authentic expression of who you are and what you want to create in the world? And I prioritized that this year so that it could unfold the way that it needed to unfold.
Right. And, what we need in books in particular is courage, not content. The fact that you were able to write 33,000 words in 3 days just shows that showing up for yourself and doing the work first from the inside out, that's where books come from. Because plenty of people, myself included, buy books, best-selling books even, and they sit on our nightstand because they don't call to us. They're well-written, perhaps, but there's not a soul-level connection to what this means to anyone. It's not that level of a commitment for the reader. When you pick up a book that shifts you, just know that that's the agony, the courage it took for the author to create it. And otherwise, it's just content knowledge. I call it sunshine, right? And this is why I slow authors down, and why I slowed you down in the beginning, not to rush to the writing and look in your lifeline and look in the things that create who you are, is that so many of us, we're misunderstanding the power of a book. And you found it, you see it. And that's why it was able to be written so quickly. It was the creative block is the internal work. And so many authors just try to make it a process to solve that problem. And it's not just a process.
Yeah. And kind of the agreement that I made with myself when I wrote those words was, not prioritizing the book proposal. Because remember, when we first started working together, I was like, all right, book proposal first, and then we'll start writing the manuscript. Okay.
Okay.
But it's like, how do you write a book proposal for a book when you don't know what it is? And like, right. I didn't know what it was because there's so many books in me. And I think that's one of your gifts, is us being able to pull all of those pieces out to connect. And even when we pulled all the pieces out, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of books in here.
Yep.
And then I've had so many iterations of my table of contents and the outline. I've like shifted it and tweaked it and adjusted it. I'm like, it's so different and yet so the same. Like the stories and the essence are still there. And so there's an art in making that transition between like just like who you are, your essence, and then putting it into form for people to consume. And even the 30,000 words that I wrote, that's not the book, if that makes sense. Like it's like, it's just like something that needed to get out of me so I could, one, trust myself that I have what it takes to write. Two, what if I'm writing in such a concentrated amount of time, what would like come out of me? And then from that place, I had like what you call, like what you said, the courage and also the confidence of like, I have a better idea of what's in this book proposal. But even with that, there's still stuckness and agony in that process of like, wait, like, I think even just our last call and like maybe a few weeks ago, I was like, Azul, can you tell me what the book is about? Can you just reflect that back to me? Like, what did I just say? And so I want to say, even with me writing all those words, and I just recently finished my book proposal. It's 35 pages. And, my literary agent and I are making our final tweaks and adjustments to shop it. But I'm also unattached. Like if nobody wants to buy the book, a traditional publishing house, I'll self-publish it. Like that's how committed and connected to the work I am versus the milestone achievement of traditionally published book by this year. Or else, like then this work means nothing, or it doesn't matter. Like I'm just on a different path than that. So I wrote a lot of words. Don't know if any of those words will actually go into once I get into the manuscript process. And I wrote a book proposal. Like it's here. Like I don't know. Azul, what thoughts or do you have from just all of it?
You know what? The thing is, people probably are surprised hearing that it's a 30-something page book proposal. And the book proposal is almost harder than the book because you're giving it to somebody else who's then giving it to somebody else who's then trying to sell it to somebody else. Like, so it's a lot of iterative conversation. But your idea of not having attachment to it is beautiful because the moment you get attached to an idea, it's the moment the creativity goes to slumber. And I tell people, a book is just what you can say right now, because in 2 months from now, you're going to grow as a human and the book will be different 2 months from now. So you can't keep thinking that it has to be right, because there's no being right with this. And when you talked about the books coming out in multiple stages, like, oh, this could be this book or that book, I always find that creativity births other things. They don't come, ideas rarely, in my opinion, come by themselves. They always go, hey, if you're going to be born, I want to be born. Like, can I come with you? Like, they just pop onto the page. And it's confusing to authors. They're like, so they try to stuff it all into one book. And I'm like, no, the biggest misperception for really beautiful ideas are that they're supposed to be big. And you're like, I need that big idea. This is my first book or my last book or my third book, and it should be big and amazing. And I say, that's wonderful. But understand that ideas that are worthy of going into the world are just little small ideas that you noticed, that you decided to pick up and pay attention to, that everybody else just walked over. But you said, hey, did you notice this? And someone's like, oh my gosh, no. That's why I'm struggling. But yes, that makes so much sense. Why didn't I see that before? And it's a small idea that resonates with people. And they go, hey, Jane, did you notice this? They're like, no. Oh my gosh. Hey, Bill, did you notice this? No. And that small idea only becomes a big idea when other people can carry it and pass it to somebody else. And so many authors are transfixed on this idea that I have to come up with a really good idea, great content. And I say, the easier it is for a person to carry that idea to somebody else, the more likely it is to become, quote, the big idea, or be shared, or become useful. So it's a dilemma for authorship, because they see books as words. Like, look at all these words. It's a thick book. I'm like, words get in the way of the truth, because so many books I bought, I didn't finish reading because I'm like, didn't really resonate with me. Didn't really matter to me. It actually wasn't that impactful. It was just a lot of repetition. I didn't find myself here. And I don't have one single idea that makes you go, I got to talk about this with somebody else. But that's what they're looking for, because you don't remember all of the book. You hopefully remember the idea that goes, this is shifting the way I see the world. That's what I find it's really difficult for people to get caught up on the content of a book. Like, this has to be it. And that's why I slow authors down and say, look, if you can see why you're the unique messenger. I know someone who says this. Her name's Jadah Sellner. She says there's no unique messages, only unique messengers. And I was like, that's what you need, Jadah. Remember, you're the unique messenger. Why have you arrived in this place in the world when your peers, your sisters, your siblings, your brother didn't arrive here, even though they had the same sort of similar life journey? It's because you see the world differently. And that part is what I'm trying to help authors see. And that's what I think you're observing and looking at the book, is you see so much possibility and you're growing as the book is growing. And so, I hope it stays iterative, because when you land on that simple idea that just goes, wow, you'll know it's not complex, it's simple. And that's the part that's hard. It's not looking for big ideas, looking for simple ones.
Yeah. And I love that you shared about, you're growing as a human, like, every day. So, like, the book that I'm going to write 2 weeks from now is different than the book that I'm writing today. And like, it's like our brains know stuff. I've written 2 book proposals already for Simple Green Smoothies. I exited the company before the second book deal. Yeah. And I know that, like, the outline, the content, right? Like, is not the same once you publish it. It's just not. It's just, It's like, here's a guesstimate, here's an idea, just so we can, like, move past this stage. And so we can get so caught up in that needing to be right. And it's going to change as you read it and reread it and edit and like all of that. There's so much room for editing, but like you said, that we kind of go into editing mode first, and then there's nothing to edit because we're not willing to be courageous and be in our creativity. And that's something that I've really reconnected to in 2020. I feel like I've just really been prioritizing myself. Like, I've been dancing, being in my body, just doing things that give me joy. I've been meditating daily with my husband, George. like really just taking care of myself. I've been cooking like Azul, like I don't like to cook.
I was like, wow, awesome.
Like, but I've been connecting to my creative expression in different ways and input, like putting good things in me so that what comes out of me is potent, is real, is true. And like there's this cycle. So a couple of things that really helped me. One, keeping you in my corner has been such a gift. I also, George and I did the Artist Way for 12 weeks, which is like artist in recovery, kind of following that 12-week, 12-step process, just reconnecting to that creativity, that artist within. And that's been my commitment, is like, I'm an artist before I'm an entrepreneur. And even before like mother, wife, all these labels and roles and hats that we wear, I allowed the artist, the creative with me to get really dormant and stale and stagnant. And she wasn't alive and she wasn't being nourished. That like childlike wonder was just kind of flat because I got lost in the sea of business, of all of that, and taking parts of my identity out. So there's been a lot of reclamation of my Black identity, of being Black, Chinese, and white, and like integrating that, and also my identity as an artist. Like I did theater and spoken word poetry. So I've been signing up with like my favorite queer poets for creative poetry writing classes, just reconnecting to those parts of myself that really have nothing to do with the book and everything to do with the book, And I've also been taking classes to learn about storytelling, like just back to the basics of like the hero's journey. And I don't know, just really recommitting to being an artist and a lifelong learner. And I think where I was coming at the book in 2018 was coming at it as an expert. Like I already know things, I already know the end game. And now I'm coming at it from a really open mind to receive and learn and absorb and take, and then transform that into something. And actually, like, I don't know things. I'm actually not an expert. I'm just an expert at curiosity and observing and seeing what moves through me.
Right. And this is the point. I'm glad you're sharing that. Being the creative that you are is how you got here. You were solving problems through creativity all along the way. And that's how, your brick and mortar got built. That's how your Simple Green Smoothies got built, is curiosity and creativity. And if you live in that space, you don't worry about content so much because you start to realize you are the one. Jadah is the one that creates these things, not the great idea on the other end. It's just something that is evolved. So when I was a kid, I was given a magnifying glass and a science kit, and I would take it outside, and it was so cool because you could look at things. But the other thing I discovered is you can burn things with this thing in the sun, burn my friend's leg or a leaf or, unfortunately, maybe an ant, which I own so karma for. But that idea that the sun that just warms your hand normally, if you put that magnifying glass in front of it, it transforms that sunshine into a focus point that ignites. All of us creators, entrepreneurs, are just selling sunshine. Everyone else has the same access. It's not like we have something special as far as content goes. We're not sharing something new. The sunshine isn't new. What's new about it is when you look at your own life, your lifeline, your story, your truth, your way you see the world, you are the magnifying glass that transforms that ordinary sunshine into something beautiful that ignites. And that's what authorship really is connecting to that truth, so that even though someone else might be talking about the same thing, and this is what you mentioned earlier, someone else is writing my book with a book topic. No, they're just selling the same sunshine, but your focused light will change that and transform it and ignite it for somebody who otherwise wouldn't be able to have that experience because everyone else is just selling sunshine.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I'm so thankful to have you as a friend, as a coach, as just a creativity encourager. I think that's been just the invitation to really tap back into our creativity and our creative genius and spark and play. And sometimes I just like want you in my pocket and like, like at home, like I love your perspective on how we learn and that we learn more about ourselves in the process. And I think that's what a book, when we're writing in this way, really invites us. It's a mirror. A lot of times people are not ready to see themselves, to truly see themselves. And I'm going all the way in. Like, this is a decade-long process that I want to commit to, is like how to really own being an author and a creator and someone who really deeply, like, and fully embodies trusting the process and the timing and being willing to sit in the unknown and the messy middle and all of that. Like, yeah, I just feel like a really different person than the 2 years ago when we picked up this book. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see what she becomes.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And as I get to be on the sidelines or in the corner, as you said, it's just an honor to be able to be a co-pilot and share some of my reflections with you so that you can see the truth that's in you. And that's all my job is. I'm more of a mirror than I am anything else. Just saying, did you see this about yourself? Did you hear what you said? Because that's the truth. There's no way I can make anyone a better writer. You already are a wonderful writer. It's just a matter of reminding you and showing you that truth.
Well, this was fun, and I can't wait for us to do behind the scenes part 3. Mm-hmm. This was just an opportunity to update everyone of how I haven't been hiding. I've been healing and creating and doing really big work behind the scenes that feels so aligned with who I am and the message that I want to share with the world. And I'm really committed to this path and this process. So thank you for being on this journey with me, Azul.
Thank you for inviting me on it.
Thank you so much for your heart and attention and listening to Lead with Love. You can always get the links and resources mentioned in each episode over at leadwithlovepodcast.com so that you can build a sustainable business and live a creative life on your terms. If this message, Leading with Love, resonates with you and you want to take a stand for remembering that there are humans with beating hearts behind the numbers, I would love for you to subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave an honest review. It would mean the world to me, and it also helps more people spread more love in the world, which we really, really need. I also love hearing from you. So as you're listening, take a screenshot, share your favorite takeaway, and tag me on Instagram and Facebook at Jadah Sellner. I really appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.